investigating the question, to what extent might indigenous people and the environment be affected by different forms of tourism in Thailand?
Ecotourism is a form of tourism involving visiting relatively undisturbed natural areas with having a low impact on the wildlife, while community-based tourism is a specific tourism plan which aims to enrich the livelihoods of the local and indigenous people while preserving their culture.
In this presentation, we will be exploring these, as well as traditional approaches to tourism. Thailand's natural habitats and unique culture caused big hotel corporations to expand into Thailand, which caused the development of the tourism industry.
Our research papers explored several different aspects of the effects of tourism on indigenous people and the environment, with Etta focusing on ecosystems and the environment, Hayden focusing on the economics in regards to indigenous people and their society, and with me focusing on indigenous society and culture.
After compiling our solutions and information, we came to this claim. Tourism in Thailand should continue in moderation while incorporating other policies. They should firstly sustain the environment by reserving spaces for environmental preservation, then allow indigenous people to educate tourists on their impact on wildlife, and indigenous people to tours. And finally, allow indigenous people more autonomy over their land and the option of opting out of the tourism industry. There are several limiting factors in our research. One of the limitations we need to consider is how there are less incentives for the Thai government to give indigenous people more autonomy. The government for tourism, because traditional tourism creates greater profits, so the government would have to be convinced that our solution benefits outweighs a potential financial loss. As well as our lack of personal experience in Thailand and its culture, our solution might not be necessarily perfect for everyone, and government reluctance to comply with the solution. There's also the hostility indigenous people face towards aid helpers, as well as the barrier between indigenous people because of the different groups there are. And lastly, the religious beliefs.
One of the main issues that Thailand faces is the government not supporting and allocating the wildlife foundations enough money for them to be able to protect their animals and their natural habitats. In Thailand, the Asian elephant population has decreased at a rapid rate from almost 100,000 to only 1,500 in the last decade, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. These tourism companies, along with the locals, play a large role in Thailand's environment, and therefore they have the responsibility to keep their streets clean and their attractions environmentally friendly. Both businesses and locals clear land in order to build hotels, farm, and other restaurants. Locals are often simply motivated to provide for their families and don't always see or understand what problems their actions can cause, such as deforestation. While when businesses clear land, it often means taking the locals' land, leaving them without a place to farm, which means no income and no way to provide for their family. But when trying to educate locals on their choices, religious beliefs become a large limitation. As I stated earlier, Thailand is a tourist hotspot, and with over 5,000 tourists visiting Maya Bay daily, they have caused it to shut down. Tourists would trash the beach with beer bottles and other items. The coral reefs were dying due to the number of people walking on them, and the water pollution became a concern as the result of boats parked in a very small area. This beautiful beach is supposed to reopen in 2021, but park officials say sadly there's not much hope for the future of Maya Bay. Worldwide, environmental scientists are trying to help fix Thailand's environment from being destroyed by tourists and locals alike. In order for change to be made, the Thai government needs to implement laws and regulations for the country to follow. Meanwhile, the United Nations Environmental Program is making an effort to promote sustainable and energy-efficient buildings while assuring affordable housing for its citizens. They are working to connect better with the locals and teach them how their actions are creating a negative impact on the environment.
There are several groups in Thailand which are officially classified as mountain tribes by the Thai government, who have been living in northern Thailand for centuries. In the past decade, the government has emphasized community-based tourism, which is a tourism plan which emphasizes indigenous people and tourism companies engaging with tourists and local communities. There have been many instances where indigenous people have spoken out about and advocated for their rights, which is evidenced by the Declaration on the Rights of Asian Indigenous People, which was written in 19 1993 in response to what they call systematic campaigns of extermination, development, aggression, etc. The declaration also specifies how tourism threatens their lands. This shows their clear intention to protect themselves from their governments, and although the document concerns Asia, Thailand is home to many indigenous people who suffered at the hands of their government. Andrew Allen Johnson argues that the Thai government is depoliticizing and homogenizing indigenous people by referring to them as hill tribes. We think that this may be to draw attention away from the heavily political statements that they've made in the Declaration on the Rights of Asian Indigenous People. We also think that the government may be doing this to perpetuate a stereotype which can help them fuel community-based tourism projects, which can be seen in this advertisement above. Culture is ever-changing, which makes it very difficult to define. Despite this, community-based tourism efforts can have a negative effect on a community on a social-cultural level. These negative impacts involve several issues, including sex tourism and cultural exploitation, which Hayden will elaborate on later. Others include when the government forces indigenous people to engage in community-based tourism and only allowing them their land if they do so, as well as the power imbalance between indigenous people and tourists. Because of economic benefits, which Hayden will elaborate on later, community-based tourism should continue existing. However, the plan should be altered to give indigenous people the option of opting out while not having to worry that their land will get taken away. In addition, indigenous people should have more community-based tourism options, and they could teach tourists about their tribe's history and about their landscape. If these solutions are followed and indigenous people are offered the role of the educator rather than a group to be observed, the power imbalance between indigenous people and tourists may become more equal.
Governmental oppression has forced many indigenous people to adapt to the modern rat race. This is evident in Thailand, which heavily relies on the tourism industry for revenue. Modernization hit Thailand in the 19th century when the opening of the commercial rice market opened up global contacts for Thailand. According to the Thai Ministry of Tourism and Sports, over 32.59 million tourists travel to Thailand per year, earning the Thai economy 2.52 trillion baht, which roughly translates to $71.4 billion US. This has led to a mass opening of job opportunities for Thai locals, with 6.2 million jobs generated in 2013. Despite the positive benefits of tourism in Thailand, there are many aspects that are not exposed to the public. In an article by Jessica Thur, a prominent feminist and cultural activist, she reveals that Thai village officials have refused medical care, education, rightful wages, and technology to keep the camps as primitive as possible for the tourists. With no other methods of income, indigenous people are forced to contort themselves in ways such as neck elongation to attract tourist attention and donations. According to the UN, the Kayan lives in designated villages that are dubbed authentic, but are often no more than a repeated performance put on by members of the community because they have no other choice. Governmental oppression has forced many indigenous people into the sex trade in Thailand. It also attracts a lot of tourists, fueling the supply of trafficking victims for sexual exploitation and corruption. The Thai sex trade was estimated to be worth $6.4 billion US a year in revenue in 2015, accounting for a significant portion of the national GDP. Banwahir, for example, is a poor indigenous community which is located in the north of Thailand. It has survived from crippling economic pressure due to child prostitution. The main clients are Westerners and pay little for the exploitation of indigenous people. A crucial way to uphold respect for both indigenous people's economy and culture is through education. Through education, more people can understand the economy of indigenous people and how to uphold mutual respect between tribes, tourists, and the government. Education for the promotion of fair wage and the sustainability of local culture through modern-day schooling and raising awareness from the travel industry so tourists can be deterred from traveling to places where indigenous people are suppressed by the government.
To conclude, first, the government should sustain the environment by reserving spaces for environmental preservation. They should allow indigenous people to conduct tours on this land where they could teach the tourists about indigenous history as well as the impacts of tourism on wildlife. Finally, the government should allow Indigenous people more autonomy